Welcome to the VIP Home Podcast, where we talk about all the things homeowners need to know.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the VIP Home Podcast. Today we are talking everything fire prevention, and we're here with Andrea from the NFPA. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Really excited, and happy Fire Prevention Week, everyone.
Woo! So this year's Fire Prevention Week topic is cooking safety. So could you just share a little bit about that and some prevention tips and tricks homeowners can use?
So this week is our 98th annual Fire Prevention Week. Fire Prevention Week is actually the oldest public health observance in the United States. This year's theme is Serve Up Fire Safety in the Kitchen. So every year we pick a theme for Fire Prevention Week, which is always held in October during the week that October 9th happens to commemorate the Great Chicago Fire. The Fire Prevention Week theme this year we picked was for cooking. Even before the pandemic hit, this was our theme, and it actually resonates even more because we're finding out that fire departments are actually being called to more home cooking fires. Now, this year that everybody is home, people are on top of each other, cooking is still the leading cause of home fires and home fire injuries. And so that's really critical to understand because, and it makes sense that this is a behavior that you engage in every day, but there are so many things that you can do. And I'll do my quick facts and figures because over 30% of those cooking fires are unattended cooking. Somebody leaves the stove, leaves something braising, frying, they get distracted. They start cooking, they forget that they're cooking, they fall asleep. Unattended cooking accounts for nearly a third of these home cooking fires. So, we like to say, stand by your pan, keep an eye on what you fry. Whatever you have to do, ban Snapchat from your kitchen cooking so you're not constantly, doing that. Those are some of the most important things that you can do in terms of cooking. And happy to chat a little bit more about some of the different causes and elements of that.
Yeah, definitely.
What's kind of interesting when we think about cooking fires, and just to put it in some perspective, right? In a 4-year period from 2014 to 18, fire departments responded to over 170,000 cooking fires. That's around 470 home cooking fires a day. Okay, that was reported. The peak days. Can you guess the peak days for cooking fires? What holidays?
Oh, Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving and Christmas Day are the peak days that fire departments get called away to come to your house. Yeah. And so you think about it, on Thanksgiving Day, you're cooking probably more than you normally do. You have more going on around you, which means sometimes more eyes mean less eyes on it, right? Somebody always thinks someone's paying attention to it. Cooking and Christmas Day are two of the biggest cooking fire days. So I'm a big fan of saying, let this, we say this Christmas, you want a visit from Santa, not your fire department, right? Those cooking fires lead to not only deaths, but multiple, injuries. And we're talking, again, our latest report found that in that 2014 to 2018 period, where they looked at the 172,000 cooking fires that fire departments responded to, that resulted in 550 deaths, that resulted in well over 5,000 injuries, that also resulted in $1 billion of property damage. Whoa. That is one of the things that we also talk about is, we want you to be safe. We don't want you to get injured. But now you're also just dealing with property damage. Mm-hmm. You're dealing with an insurance claim. You're dealing with having to fix something. You're dealing now with the kitchen that is unusable for a period of time. So $1 billion in property damage is not small potatoes, right? Those are really some of the things. I think the other piece is range top is where the majority of fires happen. That makes sense, right? Yeah. That things on top where there is. But interestingly enough, electric stovetops are more likely to cause fires than gas stovetops. And again, it sounds counterintuitive, right? Because you think flame must equal fire. The electric coil range tops can reach 1,000 degrees. And yes. And so this is why it's really important that you don't leave kitchen towels or anything flammable near that. And thinking about the grease and any of the oil, right, that you're cooking, that is reaching 1,000 degrees underneath it, it's creating a really hot atmosphere for the oil. And this is why things can so easily flame up. And those are things. I watched a cooking show recently, and the cook was wearing these really lovely bell sleeves, and she kept reaching over, and I'm like, oh, that's the worst thing to do. Wear your short sleeves when you're cooking, wear tight sleeves when you're cooking. It's not
I pass.
Yeah, no, you don't pass for cooking. You pass for fashion, but you don't pass for cooking. But those range top fires account for, 60% of the overall cooking fires, 87% of the deaths, and 78% of the injuries. So the key here is we're talking about burns, we're talking about clothing that can catch fire, and then we're talking about, other things that can catch fire, and that dish towel, that can so quickly spiral out of control. And many of the deaths occurred because people tried to fight the fire themselves. This is the bit of the nuanced message I want to, talk about. When you cook, you should always have an oversized lid next to you.
Okay.
If there's a flare up, quickly slide the lid on it, turn off the ignition, step away until If you are attentive and you're standing by your pan and you have your lid, that's a really easy thing to do because you have a flare up, ooh, boom, done, turn it off. You've walked away, you don't have a lid, it starts to ignite. And now people think, oh, let me figure out a way to do something about it. I'll grab the pan, I'll throw it in the sink, I'll do this. That's how people get injured. That's how people die. That is when you need to get out, call 911 and stay out. Let the professionals take care of the firefighting. Those are the really critical pieces of the cooking thing again. And so it's, before I drive, I put on my seatbelt. I make sure my seat is in the right position, right? I make sure my side view my mirrors are all right. Well, before I cook, is my cooking area free of anything that can catch fire? Is my stove clean? Because if we don't clean the stovetop and there's a lot of residual grease and oil, now that in itself can get ignited and cause a fire. Same with oven fires, right? Think about, and it happens, right? Stuff falls out of your pan and now the bottom of your oven is full of stuff. You need to clean that oven. So there's your other servicing, right? Clean your stove, clean your oven. Okay. Those things are important, right? Because those things are ignitable. We're talking about very hot temperatures for a concerted period of time with flammable material.
Imagine, or let's say that the stove fire got a little out of hand. You were paying attention, but it just went a little quick. Is that why we have fire extinguishers, or is there a way that between the cover and leaving your property, is there something like an interim that somebody could do?
When we talk about home fire extinguishers, there's a couple of pieces that we just say as caveats, right? A home fire extinguisher is a tool, and when it's used properly, it does its job. Children should never use a fire extinguisher. We're pretty adamant about that. And in fact, we actually say kids should always be 3 feet away from the cooking. Because burns from hot foods, liquids, kids pulling things on top of themselves and knocking into things are still sending so many kids to the emergency room and causing major burns. This is not a place for kids. There are different types of fire extinguishers. And so the average one that's out there, that's the most reasonably priced that people might lead to, is not rated for a grease fire and will actually make a grease fire worse. When we're talking fire extinguishers, and that's why we are more of a proponent of, if it's bigger than your ability to slide the lid on it and turn it off, get out. And call the fire department, because you should never do those kinds of fire extinguishers on a grease fire. You're going to make it worse, and now you're increasing your risk of injury. Again, if it's something that you know how to use and you've practiced using it and you have it handy and you are at that point where you have a flare up that's bigger than your lid and the area is safe around you, people have successfully used a properly rated fire extinguisher. But it needs to be the fire extinguisher that can also handle grease fires, because that's probably what the most likely cause of one of those fires is going to be. And so that's the part that is a little tricky when we talk about that.
Good to know. I remember when I was young, my nanny at the time was like pouring tea. She was from London, so had tea, like afternoon tea. It was on the counter. I must have been on like a step stool or something. And I had hit the mug with my arm as she was pouring it. She didn't know that the cup had knocked and just poured the hot water on my arm. And that was not fun. That was actually very bad. But it's not cooking related, but like 3 feet is probably.
Well, no, it is cooking related. And I think that's one of the things is scald burns from things like hot liquids actually account for 50% of the burns in kids under 5. And this is the thing that emergency room healthcare professionals tell us all the time is there was a parent carrying a cup of coffee in their kid, or the cup of coffee got knocked over, or I was getting ready to serve this big hot bowl of soup and I bumped into those. So, I mean, we're talking about 50% of them being from those things, and the other 40% from coming in contact, where kids are coming in a contact burn. And that's why we say about the 3-foot zone for kids. Keep the kids 3 feet away from your cooking and where you're serving.
No, I think that's a wonderful rule. There's nowadays, I feel like everyone's like, oh, my kid and I cook and bake and everything. And it's like, you could do the mixing.
Yeah, exactly. Kids need to learn. I mean, it's, I have a 14-year-old. And so, when she was 12, it was time to learn how to make your own ramen, right? But absolutely, you want to do it. And I want to say for the kitchen, we think about those things, right? So like I always say, if you're going to cook, have the big lid near you. Obviously, oven mitts for yourself because you don't want to be coming in contact with the burn. A timer. Now, we have timers on our phones. Many stoves have timers on the stove, or you can have that, the thing that you turn. The timer is another one that's a really important piece, because if you have something that's on a simmer or in the oven and you set the timer to remind yourself to check on it frequently, right? Obviously never leave the house. So grilling, broiling, braising, frying, stay right there all the time. Now for things that are maybe a longer term cooking, those are the kinds of things that when it's going to be 2 hours, set your timer for every 15 minutes to check on it. There's no reason not to. Again, because people get distracted, because people fall asleep. So many things can happen.
Amazing. As an adult, I already know so much more.
Yeah.
So as we kind of get into the holidays and people are cooking and a bit more distracted with their loving families and fun, can you share a little bit more about how we can prevent fires this holiday so that our firefighters can stay home with their families?
You're absolutely right. As I mentioned, Thanksgiving and Christmas are the other top two, but the holiday season in and of itself brings more people, more alcohol use. So I'm just going to say, one of the other things is we need to be really careful if you're cooking and to not be under the influence, to not be drinking when you're cooking, because that's, again, when more mishaps happen because you are not really paying attention. When we think about serving up fire safety for your holiday season, right? Think about what you want to get out of it. Think about the fact that you want to enjoy the day. And this happens to me because I have 35 people come over on Thanksgiving, right? So not this, I don't know if it'll happen this year, but, that's with 35 people. And I've got different things going. I've got my 2 turkeys going in my 2 ovens. I mean, I'm like all over this. And people are coming in. And I brought this dish, and I brought this dish, and I brought this. And now things are starting to, and people are setting things on the stove because they think that's the right place to leave it and they don't know what might be going on. Or they set it on the stove and they forgot to remove the cardboard or something from their package, right? These are the kinds of things that you want to, those are all, it's kind of the chaos of it that kind of creates the risk. And so the key is for you to sort of plan in advance. I'm hosting this. This is where I want people to put things, right? And so I set aside a counter and I'm like, whatever you bring, put it on that counter. I'll deal with it later. I don't want it coming near my stove. I don't want it around my stove because it's going to get in my way. I'm going to knock over things. I'm going to get burned. Those are the kinds of things that you can do is, think about it in advance and kind of have your game plan. Again, before, have everything cleaned really well. So before you begin that cooking, this is the time, especially clean your stove, clean your range top, because the oven fires that happen are a big piece of this, because there's already a lot of old food and grease at the bottom. And now you've probably put in a turkey and some additional things. And if you think about how long you cook a turkey for, now you have, again, that sustained heat. So for an even longer period of time. So it makes sense that these are the things that are happening when you combine all those pieces with it. So clean your equipment beforehand, have a designated spot for food to go, make sure you have a designated place for hot foods that's away from kids that people can't pull on themselves, and designate who gets to be there. That's the other thing. I am like, stay away. So I am. My mom and I get to be behind there. Okay. And other people come in. Can I help? Can I help? Oh, let me come in. Let me test. Let me do the sauce. Let me do this. Right. But now you've added to the chaos and you've added to the actual risk. Yes. When you're allowing people in. So everybody knows now, like I have like these like invisible walls here, and I'm like, nope, nobody comes over here unless I ask you to. Say if you're hosting, think of other jobs you can give people so that you can keep them out of your cooking. I do the same thing. I wait to have my glass of wine till we're getting ready to eat. I need to be able to focus. I need to be on my game here. And so those are the kinds of things. I think, again, with Christmas, there's definitely a lot of diversions that happen. You tend to set things on the stove and you're so easily diverted. And again, sometimes it's just as simple as forgetting to turn something off. And we've all done that, right? I mean, we've a huge culprit. We've all done that. I mean, that's human nature, right? So, and that's why things like timers are important, just to remind you to go back, just to kind of keep you on your game, and never think that you're going to step away from it you think, oh, I have it here. It's fine. I'm going to step here to go grab something, but inevitably something distracts you and makes it take longer. And now you've come back to a fire, right? So I think that's where, if you ever have to leave it, just turn it off. Just good to know. There's no reason to keep it going. Just turn it off if you ever have to step away.
My husband would tell me that I'm the queen of taking something out of the oven and being like, oh, let me just try it. I'm not sure it's done yet. And then it'll be done. And then I'll forget about the oven being on because I was like, oh, I'm going to most likely pop it back in. Right. And then I'll be cleaning up after dinner and be like, wow, it's really warm. And then I'll look over and be like, gosh, not again.
It's so easy. And I mean, that's why I say setting a timer, even just to remind you to go back to pay. It's like, oh, did I forget anything? Those are absolutely the kind of, we're busy. We've got a lot on our minds. The pandemic hasn't made it any easier. Anything you can do to prevent in the first place by doing some of your basic, your home health screenings, right? Yeah. Your maintenance. And then while you're in it is just have these little things that are there for you. And so those are the kinds of things that just every day will actually make a difference.
I love that. So my last thing is, we do a segment most times on homeowner horror stories. So I don't know if you have one personally or one that you've heard, but if you have one that you'd like to share, we always kind of just to see how we can not do that again.
I work with a lot of firefighters who have a lot of horror stories, and so many of them do not end well at all, right? But when I meet with fire service, I don't have a fire service background. I have a public health and health education background, but years ago, we experienced a fire in our rental property, and it was because of a candle that was left unattended burning, and the person forgot to extinguish it before she left. And thankfully, nobody was hurt. I got firsthand look into what now has to happen. The apartment was unlivable. The apartment below was unlivable because it was waterlogged, because when they came to fight the fire.
Oh, no.
Right? Yeah, I never thought I'd end up at the National Fire Protection Association, right? I never thought that at the age of 20, when I saw that happen, that years later I'd be there. But it always stayed with me that this simple thing caused so much chaos. And we were the lucky ones because nobody was hurt, right? And I think that's the kind of stuff that it is so important to me, that there is a whole host of things that we should be paying attention to for our health and safety. And this one is so simple and so critical.
I feel that a lot of people, especially their home now, candles seem to just be more common. And I'm in a rental unit. I'd be really mad if my neighbors did that. Just gonna
I mean, and that's it. This isn't about you. This is about everybody around you too. Someday we'll talk more about wildfire mitigation, and the stuff that you do to your house to prevent your house from igniting also helps prevent your neighbor's house. This is something about your safety, your family safety, your home safety, but it's also about, everybody else around you.
They say community for a reason.
That's right.
Well, did we miss anything? Is there anything you wanted to add?
If you want to know more about any of these things for your home, the fastest and easiest place to do is to go to firepreventionweek.org, fpw.org or firepreventionweek.org. That will take you straight to our everything you need to know about cooking safety, but it also has additional information and will lead you to our tip sheets and checklists for cooking safety, candle safety, electrical and heating safety. This is the time to start thinking about those things. We have checklists for caregivers of older adults. And what's really critical about this, we talk a lot about parents and kids, but older adults have the highest rates of injuries and deaths from home fires and home fire injuries. And so this is really critical. And because of the myriad of things that might be, mobility issues, they can't escape as quickly, people wearing bathrobes and cooking and maybe have older cooking equipment. So we have a lot on there that's really for you to use with yourself, your family, our escape planning grid. You just download it and you draw out your plan. You make your plan with you, your roommates, whoever's in your house with you. And those are the kinds of things that you just take some time, do it, even have games and apps and things to play with so you can have a little fun. But firepreventionweek.org. And for the kids, go to sparky.org.
Amazing. Well, Andrea, thank you so much for your time and all this glorious information. I know I will be a better homeowner and hopefully won't set anything on fire with all your amazing tips. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Have a great day.
You too.
Get more answers to your homeowner questions by subscribing to the VIP Home Podcast, available anywhere podcasts are found.